Welcome to everyone coming in. We'll just wait a few moments for more people to join us. Okay, so let's make a start. I'm sure more people will join us as we go on. So thank you for joining us, everybody, for this Nukewatch CND Nuclear Free Local Authorities webinar. The title is Nuclear Convoys. Did you know that nuclear warheads could be driving through your town? And although this is not directly on the big issue of the day, the war in Ukraine, it is actually related, because I think what we understand from that terrible war and from the rapidly increasing threat of nuclear war, we understand more than anything else that these nuclear warheads are not just some anachronistic symbolic status symbol, although they do have elements of that. They are actually weapons of war. And disturbingly, over the past few years, we've actually seen talk of using nuclear weapons. Former President Trump talked of usable nuclear weapons. In fact, he had them produced and deployed in the last year of his administration. So the narrative has changed from the dominant one during the Cold War, that they would never be used, that there was a balance of terror based on mutually assured destruction. Now the narrative has rapidly changed towards the usable nature of nuclear weapons. And I know we're all doing everything we can now in this very difficult situation to ensure that peace can prevail in Ukraine and that we will not go to nuclear war. But I know we're all very concerned that that is a possibility. So these weapons are on our streets, and here to talk to us this evening about this vital issue are three very knowledgeable speakers. So it's a great pleasure to welcome our speakers. We have Juliet Macbride from Nukewatch and Aldermaston Women's Peace Group. She will be explaining what a nuclear convoy is and the work of Nukewatchers. Then we'll turn to Nuclear Free Local Authority Chair, Councillor David Blackburn. He'll talk about the impact of nuclear convoys on local authorities and indeed why the NFLA opposes those convoys. And then we'll hear from Rob Edwards, who will be known to many of you as a journalist with the Ferret. And he will explain what he's uncovered about the convoys and their dangers. So it's going to be absolutely fascinating and really, really useful in our work against nuclear weapons. So each speaker will talk for around 10 minutes, and then we'll have time for a Q&A session. So if you have questions, I'm sure you will, as we go along, please do put those questions in the Q&A box, which you can see at the bottom there of your screen. So without further ado, Juliet, the floor is yours.
Hello everybody. I'm a member of Nukewatch. We monitor and track the movement of British weapons of mass destruction from Burfield and Aldermaston in Berkshire near Reading to Coalport on the west coast of Scotland. Nuclear warheads have been transported in convoys on our roads since our nuclear weapons were first deployed in the 1950s and have been tracked and monitored by Nukewatch since the early 1980s. Trident warheads are manufactured and serviced at the Atomic Weapons Establishment in Berkshire. Nuclear convoys then transport the weapons to the Royal Naval Armaments Depot in Coalport, Scotland, where they are stored before eventual transfer to the Trident submarines. These secret military convoys travel our roads regularly, usually by day, but sometimes at night, carrying nuclear warheads and materials between various locations, not just military bases, but also places like Rolls-Royce, Derby, as well as between Reading and Scotland. And if we could have the roadmap slide now, please. Sarah. These are the main road that are used by the convoys. So you can see how close or not you are to a convoy route and how useful you might or might not be to us. Okay, thanks. They are weapons of mass destruction owned and wielded by the UK government. They cannot distinguish between competence, non-competence, and legally protected categories of civilians, such as nurses, doctors, children, and other vulnerable people. These weapons are therefore immoral and illegal, and now banned by the UN Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. Monitoring by Nukewatch is the only independent way that we have of assessing the size and status of the UK's warhead stockpile. In the 90s, Nukewatch correctly estimated the size of the Trident warhead stockpile at around 200, well before the government had ever published any official figures. Likewise, the increase in warhead numbers publicised in the recent Integrated Review of Security, Defence, Development and Foreign Policy has already commenced well before the official announcement, and by now is probably close to completion, according to analysis by Nukewatch of convoy journeys conducted over the last decade. Nukewatch is not a membership organisation. It is a network of individuals who campaign against nuclear weapon warhead convoys, mainly because they are part of a system of weapons mass destruction, but also because we believe that communities potentially affected by the convoys should be aware of their existence and the risks that they pose. We inform the public and local authorities of their movements and campaign against them. We only know these convoys exist because ordinary people have tracked them. We are increasingly alerted to the position of convoys by the general public through social media. Anyone interested in Nukewatch and its activities, reports and photos can access the website for details, but here's a sort of general outline. Police and Marines escort these military convoys. No radiation warning symbols are carried, and neither the public nor local authorities are given advance notice. The warheads in these lorries contain plutonium and other deadly radioactive materials. With each lorry carrying up to 8 kilograms of plutonium, any accident involving the explosion or fire could lead to a radiation plume spreading for miles, poisoning a huge area for thousands of years. The risk of a major accident rose as the traffic on British roads increased. The Ministry of Defence's emergency guidelines for nuclear transport state that should an accident involving a warhead convoy take place, radioactive contamination could be released with a risk of an explosion from the conventional warhead explosive contained in the warhead. For these reasons, people should be evacuated to a distance of 600 metres. In 2017, the Nukewatch report called Unready Scotland highlighted problems with the civil response to a warhead convoy emergency and led to a Scottish Government review of response arrangements. These convoys are made up of various vehicles numbering up to 25 or so, and often spread out over several miles of road. They tend to travel in 3 sections, comprising firstly, warhead carriers and police escort. At junctions and roundabouts, police cars will block the road, allowing the convoy unhindered access. All the rest of the convoy has to make do as best they can. The second section comprises the fire engine, without which, for safety reasons, the convoy cannot move, and 2 police vans, and sometimes my van. The last section consists of a spare cab, command or support bus with the decontamination equipment, a coach with spare bodies and equipment, and a tow vehicle. At the start of journeys and at turn-off points, the convoy will bunch up. At other times, it may be strung out for many miles in its different sections. Police cars and unmarked cars accompany the convoy. And Sarah, we've got a very short patch of film which shows the first 3 vehicles of the convoy. and the fire engine, which is sort of out of place. Is the film, Sarah? Can we have the film? If not,
It'll be coming just now, Juliet, don't worry. Sorry, Juliet. Sorry, everybody. That was Sarah on the phone saying her Zoom has completely frozen and she can't do anything. So if you wouldn't mind going ahead now, and then we'll try and show the film when Sarah is unstuck. So to speak. Sorry about that. Go ahead.
These convoys are massive.
Ah.
Oh, here we go. Here comes the convoy. These are the police ones. Here's a carrier. Then there's an escort vehicle, a carrier, an escort vehicle, a command vehicle, and a fire engine. Okay, that's fine. These convoys are massive. The carriers are huge. The police escort unmistakable. The sheer number of vehicles overwhelming. They thus attract a lot of public attention when on the road. Indeed, as an officer remarked to me, they are a menace merely by their presence, as drivers balk, get annoyed at the rolling blockades the police initiate to protect the vehicles, and so on. Breakdowns are quite common, with the convoy stopped on the motorway hard shoulder and the inside lane coned off, causing long tailbacks. New watchers may watch unobserved. Others might watch with banners marking and witnessing the convoy, or they may follow the convoy to report on what actually happens, like breakdowns or them going the wrong way, ending up in a Nottingham housing estate on one occasion. And the actual roads travelled in real time can be told with the locations of coffee breaks, meal times, or overnight stops. Though for safety reasons, this information will not be released immediately. Thus, Nukewatchers were in the area shortly after a Harrier jump jet crashed at RAF Wittering, half an hour after the convoy had arrived there for an overnight stop. In the early 2000s, Aldermaston women reported to AWE personnel at Aldermaston that planes were landing and taking off, both at RAF Wittering and Marlon, as the convoy was moving on the airbase, something those in charge of the lifespan of the warheads were unaware. So anyone who regularly travels on UK roads can help Nukewatch by letting us know if you spot the convoy. You can let us know, the quicker the better, by contacting us on the Facebook or Twitter, or by phoning us on 07824. I'm sorry, you can put up the last slide. It has all the contact details. So do put this number in your phone. We're always in need of Nukewatchers, particularly in the Midlands around Manchester and the areas bordering Scotland. Do contact us if you want to know more or ask questions later now. I'm done.
Thanks very much indeed, Juliet. And I just want to put on record the real thanks and appreciation from CND to you and to all Nukewatchers for the amazing work that you do. We really, really do appreciate it and support it very much. And if there's any more that we can do, please do let us know. So those of you who are expressing concern about the sound quality in the chat, I'm sorry about that. Sarah did try before we started to improve the sound quality, but there seems to be a technical issue with Juliet's sound, which we can't really help at this end, unfortunately. But I see James is suggesting headphones are helping. So anyway, thanks, Juliet. So now we turn to NFLA Chair, Councillor David Blackburn. David, over to you.
I'll get myself unmuted. Can I have the slides up, please? Slide one, please. Right, first of all, I'll introduce myself. I'm Councillor David Blackburn. I chair the NFLA steering group for UK and Ireland and all Ireland. I'm in the fortunate position of being re-elected the other week for a fourth term, which is rather unusual. But we do live in usual times. We usually do 3 years, but I've been kept on to do a fourth year, so I feel quite honoured about that. Slide 2, please. The NFLA was established in 1982 by Manchester after the city declared itself the world's first nuclear-free city. The pledge meant the City Council was opposed to nuclear weapons, civil defence planning and civil nuclear power. Many other towns and cities, such as my own in Leeds, followed Manchester in making this similar pledge, and from these authorities, the nuclear-free local authorities network was formed. Slide 3, please. Now, 4 decades on, we still have members across England, Wales, Scotland, and all of Ireland. We continue to oppose civil nuclear power, which has been revived by the Johnson government as a supposed green power and the answer to Britain's energy needs and climate change. Instead, we champion renewables, installation, and reducing energy use. Working with our partners in Mares for Peace and ICANN, we continue to oppose nuclear weapons and fight for the UK to sign the TPNW. And many authorities, some of them within our membership and others not, have passed resolutions, and including my own in Leeds, where I actually moved the motion and the council leader seconded it some time ago. Slide 4, please. As local authorities, we are charged with delivering local services and carrying out statutory duties, one of which is the maintaining of public health. And if you wonder where the photograph is, that's at Ellen Road football ground, where we were doing jabs during the COVID outbreak. That's why councils were so prominent in response to the health emergency represented by the COVID-19 pandemic. We also face grave emergencies. The threat posed to public health by convoys carrying nuclear warheads between Aldermaston, Burfield and Coalport Fast Lane along our public roads and motorways. And I've got to say that going back to the 1980s, this was discussed a lot. And when with this present generation of new councillors, we're having to re-educate them, because the fact is it's been forgotten about and it's still going on. Unfortunately, nuclear convoys are not new. Between 1950, or can I have slide 5, please? Unfortunately, nuclear convoys are not new. Between 1958 and 63, we had the 4 missile transporter around the counties of East Anglia, and in the 1980s, the Tomahawk cruise missiles at Greenham Common and Molesworthy. Slide 6, please. The risk hasn't gone away. Rob Edwards' Nukes of Hazard report quoted a response from the MOD's head of information to an FOI request. An accident could trigger a nuclear reaction known as an inadvertent yield, which would deliver lethal radiation doses. A terrorist attack on a nuclear convoy could cause a considerable loss of life and severe disruption both to the British people's way of life and the UK's ability to function effectively as a sovereign state. Slide 7, please. And there are accidents. In 2011, the M74 motorway, a convoy crash and radiation spill. An evaluation after the incident revealed heated disputes between staff, major difficulties, weaknesses in emergency response, poor mobile phone signals, considerable delay, conflicting scientific advice on health hazards, 5-hour wait for weapons experts, outdated paper-based communication system, confusion over radiation monitoring, but fortunately this time it was only a drill. Slide 8, please. An Operation Senator exercise conducted by the MOD with 21 other agencies from local authorities and first responders, over 1,000 people who couldn't get it right. The findings were so damning, future reports are now marked top secret, exempt from Freedom of Information Act. Slide 9, please. Local authorities and blue light services have legal duties to prepare for such emergencies. As category 1 responders, they must assess the risk of plan and exercise for emergencies, as well as undertaking business continuity management. They are also responsible for warning and informing the public in relation to emergencies. They work collaboratively through the local resilience forums and publish a community risk register every year, outlining the risks the public might face: flooding, heat waves, pandemics, etc. Slide 10, please. The MOD offers local authorities and emergency service annual guidance about nuclear convoys, but promises no information in preparing for their arrival. The guidance says that police forces are always notified in advance of convoy being routed through their area, but this is often at a short notice. And there is no obligation on the police to tell any emergency service or any local authority or even the local resilience forum. The police forces may inform fire and rescue services of the convoy if it is moving into the vicinity of a fire and rescue operation, or shortly before it enters their area of responsibility. Slide 11, please. And if they don't know about the convoys, how can they prepare and how can they communicate the risk with the public? If an accident happens, both they and the public will be in the dark. Criminally, many local authorities' resilience forums seem not to have considered the possibility of a nuclear convoy passing through their area. And very few community risk registers record any hint of a possible accident or terrorist incident involving radioactive materials. So nuclear security and ignorance compromises public safety. The NFLA do not think that that's good enough. That's why today I can announce that we are writing to every local resilience forum, questioning them about their preparations for an accident that could have such a dire consequence for public health and the nation. And when we have the answer, we will reveal them. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, David. That was, well, very disturbing. And of course, it made me think again about the situation we're in at the moment. I don't know if it's been happening in your areas as well, but there was a report in the London press that the office of the Mayor of London had said that London was well prepared for, a potential nuclear attack from President Putin. I mean, we all know that there is no possible way of preparing for a nuclear attack. You just have to stop it. You have to prevent it happening. And seeing the lack of preparation for even an accident on the roads rather than a kind of lethal, intentional detonation, it's just doesn't bear thinking about. So our work around this is really so incredibly important. And thank you, David, to you and to Nuclear Free Local Authorities for all the work that you do on this. It's incredibly important. And then we turn to our final speaker, to Rob Edwards. Rob, I have to confess to being a bit of a fan, or not a bit of a fan, a big fan of your writing. You're a journalist with the Ferret, for anyone who doesn't know Rob. And if you haven't read Rob's reports and articles, please do avail yourself of them. So, Rob, over to you.
Thank you very much, Kate, for those kind words. It's nice to know I've got, you know, two fans, you and my daughter. So thanks very much for inviting me to take part today. I listened carefully to what the other speakers have said, and I'll be adding a bit to them. I'm aware that amongst our viewers are certainly people who know considerably more about nuclear convoys than I do, so I have to crave their forgiveness for repeating things they already know. But what I'm going to do is outline some of the things I found out about nuclear convoys as a journalist with the Ferret, and I don't have a presentation like the others, just words. Perhaps I should first of all explain what the Ferret is, in case you don't know. It's a 6-year-old not-for-profit cooperative investigative journalist based in Scotland. We're owned and run by our readers and writers, some of whom I know are watching. Thank you very much. We're not owned by any distant corporation. We've published over 1,600 stories, including about 70 about nuclear weapons. And we depend very heavily on our subscribers who pay £5 a month or more. So here's a plug. Please join us if you want to support what we do. We're at theferret.scot. And if you add /subscribe to that, you can see how to become a member. And hopefully I'll remember to put the links. Oh, I see Jane has already put a link in. Thank you very much, Jane, in the chat when I'm done. So that's the plug over. So you've heard a lot, or perhaps had difficulty hearing some of it, but heard a lot about the nuclear bomb convoys. I just want to talk about very quickly about a few of the things that I've discovered with the help of campaigners and researchers. I have to say that all opinions are mine and mine only. Obviously happy to take questions afterwards. So those of you who know me, I'm a serial user of the Freedom of Information Law. I made more than 70 requests over the years to the Ministry of Defence, many of them on nuclear convoys. In 2016, in response to requests under Freedom of Information Law, the Ministry of Defence gave details of 180 safety incidents that have afflicted the nuclear weapons convoy between 2000 and 2016. Just to give you some details on that, and remember this is all the MOD's words. They included 2 collisions in May 2013. One was described by the MOD as a minor road traffic collision involving 2 convoy vehicles that left marks to bumper of 1 vehicle. The other happened when a convoy escort vehicle was leaving a rest break at an unnamed MOD base and resulted in contact with a parked civilian vehicle. In January 2014, an escort vehicle was involved in another minor road traffic collision with a car at an MOD base. In November 2014, the MOD reported that a warhead carrier suffered what it called a defective interlock, which caused the convoy to be halted. Another warhead carrier broke down and lost power when it was leaving an MOD site in September 2015 and had to return to the site. Warhead carriers also had what are called cab tilt warning lights come on 3 times in 2013, 14 and 15. High security vehicles used to carry nuclear materials experienced a battery failure in October 2013. And in 2014, a temperature gauge in one of these vehicles registered 110 degrees C. It's quite high. Just a few more examples. In 2014, in July, the convoy was forced to stop for an hour because a protester was glued to the roof of a bomb carrier, according to the MOD. In November 2015, there was a problem with dogs loose on the carriageway. And finally, the convoy's departure was delayed in January 2016, as it had been programmed for the same time as the end of a local football match with fans leaving the ground. We don't know where. So that's just the MOD's summary of incidents that it has itself recorded. In summary, I suppose you could say since 2000, according to the MOD, the convoy has collided, broken down, got lost, its brakes have failed, it's leaked fuel, and it's suffered a range of other mechanical failures. For these problems, it blames bad luck, poor weather, human error, and computer software glitches. Of course, worse could happen. As David has mentioned, a technical report declassified in 2005, which I reported about a while back, admitted that bombs damaged in a vehicle pileup or air crash could partially detonate and cause lethal radiation doses, what they called, as was said, an inadvertent yield. Just to explain that briefly, so a nuclear explosion is designed to occur when the plutonium core is compressed symmetrically by conventional explosives wrapped around it. Bombs are meant to be what's called single point safe, so a knock at any single point should not be able to trigger all the explosives around the core and cause an explosion, a nuclear explosion. But according to this declassified report, multiple failures caused by extreme accidents could result in the loss of single point safety, and this inadvertent yield could result. The chance of happening, of course, according to the MOD, are extremely low, though it's not clear what assumptions it used to make that, that assessment. And it didn't factor in deliberate acts. But an inadvertent yield, sometimes also known as a nuclear fizzle, could prove deadly. The MOD itself said it had potentially high off-site consequences, with the radiation doses ranging from 1 to 10 sieverts. That's enough to cause nausea, diarrhea, and hair loss, or in some cases, to kill you. So that's quite serious. Again, as was mentioned, no, this wasn't mentioned before, it's another thing that's mentioned before. Then there's the ultimate risk of a nuclear attack by terrorists or others, which, for understandable reasons, I guess, the Ministry of Defense hasn't said very much about. But it did once sound a very dramatic alarm. In 2006, an anti-nuclear activist, David Mackenzie, was concerned about the convoy's use of weight-restricted bridges and filed a Freedom of Information request asking about routes and tonnages. The MOD refused to provide any information response, but did say something that was quite dramatic. Of particular concern, said the MOD, is that disclosure by us of information identifying the roads which form the convoy route network and details of the abnormal load axle weights would provide valuable information to terrorists and could assist in the planning and carrying out of an attack against a convoy. That's what the MOD said in 2006. They went on, this is an issue of national security, given that such an attack has the potential to lead to damage or destruction of a nuclear weapon within the UK, and the consequences of such an incident are likely to be considerable loss of life and severe disruption to both the British people's way of life and to the UK's ability to function effectively as a sovereign state, which is, I think, one of the most dramatic reasons I've ever seen for refusing a Freedom of Information request. And I guess we should take it seriously. As was said before, of course, the MOD regularly conducts exercises about to kind of role play what might happen in nuclear convoy accidents. They're normally called or have been called Senator, and they involve the military, emergency service, and lots of other agencies. So just to give a few examples of those, Senator exercise in 1996 envisaged conventional explosives in 2 warheads detonating after a media helicopter fell onto the bomb convoy. In 1997, the Senator exercise imagined a gas tanker crashing into a weapons truck, destroying 2 warheads and scattering plutonium downwind. In 2000, Senator imagined a weapons truck smashing into a furniture van and a milk tanker. And in 2005, the Senator exercise envisaged an aircraft falling out of the sky onto a weapons convoy, which then crashed into an oil tanker on the A720 bypass around Edinburgh. And then there was Senator 2011, which we know the most about from Freedom of Information request, which has already been briefly mentioned. The exercise envisaged a large goods lorry experiencing a blowout while traveling north on the M74 near the Wraith interchange at Bells Hill near Glasgow. The lorry crashed through the central reservation, punched a hole in the side of a nuclear weapons truck, which swerved and toppled over. The leaking fuel burst into flames, and radioactivity leaked into the air from damaged warheads and started to spread over nearby communities. A second weapons carrier had to take evasive action and was involved in another collision with a lorry. In this case, we've seen the imaginary newspaper story that the Ministry of Defence thought would be written about this accident. Nuke dust disaster was the headline. 2 feared dead and hundreds at risk as deadly clouds descend. And according to this fictional newspaper story about the exercise, 100 people were said to be contaminated with radioactivity at the scene. 7 had suffered serious injuries, 2 were killed. It was a horror smash that caused nuclear carnage, according to this report.
Rob, you had your 10 minutes. You asked me to alert you.
Yes, I'm very nearly there, Kate. I did tell you to interrupt me. The report went on to say there have been lots of evacuations, lots of problems. So those are the kind of accidents the MOD imagines might happen, but says, and they rehearse for. But are they really incredible, as they say, or should we worry they happen? When you ask the MOD about these risks, they say they are tolerable when balanced against strategic imperative to move nuclear weapons. Now, what is tolerable to the MOD may not be tolerable for the rest of us. These risks, of course, very difficult to judge. There's no doubt that nuclear accident is unlikely and a lot of efforts put into avoiding it. But if it did happen, its consequences could be, I would argue, catastrophic. Thank you. Happy to take questions.
Thanks very much indeed. That was really, really interesting. Now, I've got some questions here, and I'm hoping that more will pop up. You can either put them in Q&A or you can send them to me directly, whatever you prefer. But I think what I'm going to do is read out the ones I have so far and invite the speakers to comment on those, and then we'll see if there are any further questions arising from that. And I think some of them are kind of more obviously for some people than others, and some are directed specifically. So first of all, I guess this one is probably for David, but anyone can comment, of course. NFLAs were big in the 1980s. I used to pass a nuclear-free Hackney sign on the bus every day. Are they still going strong? And what's the best way to get my council to sign up? So that's one. Then I'm thinking this one is probably for you, Juliet. What is actually involved practically in nuke watching? What would I have to do on a nighttime session? So that's, and then there's another one. Does Scotland treat the convoys differently to England? So anyone could comment on that, maybe Rob. Anyway, up to you lot. And then somewhat linked to that, there's a question aimed at Juliet. Through Nukewatch's work, the Scottish Government oversaw a review of them, which largely kept to the line that they are safe. How are Nukewatch Scotland following up the concerns that this report still brought over capacity challenges and communications between agencies? And then final question so far to Rob. One real concern in this area is that the MOD has made the documents around convoys secret and not subject to the Freedom of Information Act. Beforehand, we were aware there is a real specialist staffing issues in the MOD teams that maintain convoys. How do we know these convoys are going to be safe if we can't ask any information about them? Can we appeal to the information commissioners in England and Scotland? So, I mean, that's some good specialist questions. I'm just going to add this one that's just popped in. Given the current war climate, do you think the case for nuclear weapons will be strengthened or weakened in the minds of the public and in the presentation of the government stroke media? Good topical question there. Okay, so who would like to go first? David, over to you.
First on the NFLA front, I think what we need organisations to actually lobby their councillors, lobby their local authority. Certainly we would try to help any organisations locally that are trying to do that. And certainly before we had the lockdowns, I spent quite a bit of time in East Anglia, and we actually got some membership down there, but that to do with nuclear power station more than anything that brought that in. But I think the problem we have with local government is because we've all been cut. It's very hard to recruit newer local authorities, and political changes have happened over the years that's meant some local authorities that once were very supportive have ceased to be support. But certainly what we're doing is we're trying to go out to those authorities and talk to them and encourage them to join. And certainly online, I've had a few meetings with various people who are leaders or what have you over the last few months and that. But what we need is people in that locality to put pressure on. So if you need any help, if you get hold of the NFLA office and speak to Richard, we'll do what help we can in that. But as I say, it's got to be a teamwork. The people locally have got to press, and we'll do our bit to persuade. On the wharf flooding situation, I've got to say, I've not made my mind up yet what will happen, because situation like this can work two ways, and I think currently it's working in the direction that it's putting a bit of a fright under anybody. I mean, I'll tell you how I came to be sort of against nuclear weapons, and it was a very young age when Cuban Missile Crisis was on, and we went home from school not knowing whether we were going to be alive the day after, and that does clarify your thoughts. And I think that will do with some people, but it's hard to say out whether militarism might take over, and support for that means that we have more people wanting nuclear weapons. But I don't see any argument for that. I mean, quite honestly, I've got to say, Mr. Putin is a very good reason why, like Mr. Trump was, that we shouldn't have nuclear weapons, because people like that should not have that power to do that. I'm sure that makes people see that it's the wrong way to go.
Yes, and I think it makes it clear that nuclear weapons aren't safe in any hands. I think that's a strong message from the movement. And just if I could just throw in, I think this is really where we come in. People will be increasingly frightened about this, and we have to get our messaging out there, not least pointing out that if you have nuclear weapons, the certain truth is you're going to be a target. Obviously we don't want it.
Well, I've got to say, one of the main reasons Leeds first became nuclear-free local authority, I think it was partly transportation, but we've got Memwell just up the road, and it was a Russian, a Soviet Union target, and if you drop a decent-sized nuclear bomb on there, it's goodbye to most of Leeds and Bradford. I think that's what was in the minds of the people that brought the NFLA together.
And also, of course, I think, wasn't the film Thread set in Sheffield? Yeah. So, I mean, maybe people will dust those films off, because that was certainly terrifying. One of the things I was saying at a meeting last night was that the terrifying thing is that the bombs used on Hiroshima and Nagasaki are really small compared to a lot of the ones today. Some of them are 3,000 times the power of the Hiroshima bomb. So I mean, it's a disastrous situation. So as a movement, we've got to be out there winning people over to oppose nuclear weapons. And of course, we know from opinion polls, that the significant majority of the population supports Britain signing up to the TPNW. So let's build on that and take the opinion in that direction as a result of this terrible situation. So thanks, David, for those comments. Juliet, do you want to go next? And just in case it is to do with no distance from the mic, is there any possibility of you getting a bit closer and then unmute yourself and talk to us? Yeah, there you go.
Well, first of all, I don't know where my microphone is because it's my husband's machine. So is that any better?
You just go ahead, Juliet. You just go ahead.
Which one do you want me to answer? Somebody asked how often the convoys go from south to north, and it varies. At one point they were going about every month, but it's more like every other month, or we haven't had any this year at all. And Sean Morris asked about what Nukewatch North of Scotland have done about the report.
Oh, yes. Do you want me to read that again? Or
well, you would have to ask Jane or even Rob.
Okay, well, maybe Rob can come back to that. But the other one I was reading for you particularly, I think, is what is actually involved practically in nuke watching. What would you have to do on an all-night session or a nighttime session?
Well, if you're going out in a car, which is the most comfortable way of doing things, and very often the most you have to, because unless you're very close to the road, you need food, drink, warm clothes, a companion if you can, a lot of patience, some music, or whatever. Usually you will be given a sort of time slot during which you might expect the convoy to be going, because somebody else will have been tracking it somewhere else, and so there'll be some idea of the time. I don't think the night time is really much different from the daytime, really. And it's a question of patience, and if you don't see it, it's as important as seeing it, because it will then tell people that it must have been on another road. So even if you don't actually see the convoy, you can be really useful. Does that sound better, by the way?
It's about the same, I think. Anyway, I can hear you. I think, I'm sure if people turn their volume up, it may be a little bit muffled sounding, but we can certainly hear what you're saying. So, Juliet, would you, is it something you'd recommend to people to go out nuke watching? You say it requires a lot of patience, and, you know, is there a sense of community amongst nuke watchers? How do you support each other?
There's a great sense of community. And the best thing about the modern world is the mobile phone, because you're never alone. I mean, I do everything, more or less everything on my own. I never feel alone, because there's always somebody at the other end of a telephone, of the mobile phone. And other people are tracking the convoy, so they can let you know where it more or less might be. And you are really, really important, particularly if you follow it and you see what actually happens with a convoy, because that's the only way you will ever understand what is going on. And the things that you see are sometimes, well, a lot of it's very boring, and some of it is not. And it's all important to get the general picture. Yeah, no, I mean, I like it, and I would do it. And always have done.
And are there any particular areas in the country where you're looking for nuke watchers at the moment?
The Midlands, on borders of Scotland and around Manchester are areas that are pretty thin. But anywhere and everywhere is useful on those convoy routes.
Okay. I mean, maybe that's something we could specifically ask local C&D groups to consider. I mean, I'm sure I know that some local C&D groups are involved, but maybe we could specifically re-ask, because people's circumstances change, and it may be now possible for people to do that kind of work. So, yeah, maybe we could liaise next week, or, you know, quite soon, and see if we can ask suitable people, you know, groups in the vicinities you're talking about.
Sylvia is asking about hanging banners on bridges over motorways. Well, that would depend on your local police. Many of them don't like it, but they'll call it a hazard, whereas they don't call a convoy a hazard.
Okay. Right. Chris is saying never had to do Nukewatch at night, only late on winter afternoons. Nukewatch will reimburse petrol costs, so that's yeah, that's useful to know. So, okay. Jane Tallants, a Trident warhead is 8 times a Hiroshima bomb. A convoy probably carries 6 warheads on a road near you. So, I mean, that's the clincher, isn't it? That's why we've got to be out there. Okay, so Rob, in our final minutes, I'm turning to you then to answer those questions and say anything else you think we need to know.
Okay, thank you. It's always difficult to summarize or to answer a lot of questions in a short space. And I'm sure I won't do complete justice to the questions. But anyway, I mean, just to add a little bit to the question of frequency, I think one of the most interesting things that I reported based on Nukewatch's observations is that during 2020, of course, during the COVID pandemic and lockdown and so forth, there were 8 convoys taken between England, Aldermaston and Burfield, England, and the nuclear weapons store at Coulport on the Clyde. 8 convoys carrying an estimated 22 nuclear warheads in 2020. So that's, and as Juliet said, it varies, and we haven't had any this year as far as we know, but that's the kind of thing about frequency. There was a question about, is it different in Scotland? Can more be done to put pressure on the Scottish government? Now, because I'm not a campaigner, I'm a journalist, but my observation would be that the Scottish government, of course, which is controlled by the Scottish National Party, is ideologically and firmly opposed to nuclear weapons and wants rid of them, and said so many times. The Scottish Parliament, as a whole, has voted to get rid of nuclear weapons on repeated occasions. But of course, they don't have any jurisdictional control over them. And so they argue there's very little they can do to stop the convoys or to interfere with them. Now, of course, Nukewatch has produced a report arguing that they should do a lot more, and you could do a lot more about environmental protection and so on, and emergency services should be better informed, and local authorities should be better informed. But my sense, and I could be wrong on this, and others could correct me, is that progress has been very slow, and there's a kind of institutional reluctance on behalf of the Scottish government to really get its teeth into this issue because of the fact it doesn't have jurisdiction, and it's a police matter and it's a Ministry of Defence matter, and so on. There'll be others who'll take different views, I'm sure, within the Scottish National Party, but the government seems to be very willing to say it's opposed to nuclear weapons, but not too willing to look closely at how they're transported. That's my take on it anyway. There was also a question about freedom of information, a real issue, I think. Freedom of information requests on the convoys have to go to the Ministry of Defence, therefore they have to go to the UK freedom of information system rather than the Scottish one. The Scottish one is slightly tougher and slightly better, in my view. But in the past, that has still resulted in lots of information being made available, like the information I was quoting, and information on the nuclear exercises, on the convoys, and there is a problem, a really big problem, that the Ministry of Defence over the past few years has gradually clamped down, supported by the UK government, on free information requests. And so it's much more difficult to get information on senator nuclear exercises, or indeed anything to do with nuclear weapons from the Ministry of Defence, because they just say it's all secret for national security. And that's a real problem. I know that one of the people in the audience is Peter Burt, who might hate me for mentioning him, who has been very active in challenging this by taking the government to an information tribunal, which unfortunately didn't work. But I think it's very important to keep putting pressure on the government to make their nuclear weapons program, their nuclear convoys, more accountable by actually making them more responsive to the information requests. That's an ongoing battle. And I think there has been a real lockdown on information on nuclear within the MOD, say in the last 5 years or so, and that is disturbing. final thing I'd like to say, we're running out of time, is that you know, a lot of the work I do and a lot of the work other journalists do depends on the heroic work that Nukewatchers do by tracking, photographing, logging, and analysing these convoys. And I think, you know, particularly with a Ministry of Defence information clampdown, the work of citizens in tracking these convoys is absolutely vital to, you know, to our democracy, to our safety, and to public accountability. And long may they prosper.
Mm. Absolutely, Rob. And I mean, talking about the withdrawal of that right there around freedom of information and the kind of secrecy from the MOD and so on, it just seems to dovetail in with a whole load of other new restrictive legislation impacting on our civil and human rights, you know, from well, I mean, just thinking in the last couple of weeks about bills in Parliament, you know, not only the policing bill, but also the nuclear financing bill. You know, I mean, these things are all just absolutely shocking. And of course, because of the focus now on the war, a lot of the accountability about these things and public scrutiny is lessening. You know, and of course, now the governments are going to stop publishing figures about COVID and, you know, no rules. You know, again, we are the ones that are suffering. It's the ordinary people, of course, that are being kept in the dark, increasingly prevented from taking democratic protest action and all kinds of other stuff. Of course, there is an increase in protest, though, of course, not just on the peace front, but it's been very good to see SOS NHS out a couple of weeks ago protesting, and of course CND was joining them with the Nurses Not Nukes, NHS Not Trident placards, and then of course more recently with the cost of living crisis protests as well. So there is that upsurge in protests. I know that we are all part of that, and, you know, very committed to bringing change in the interests of peace and justice. So thanks, you wonderful speakers. Thank you so much for your contributions and for the work you do. And thanks to everyone who has attended this evening. I can see by the names on the list, and I can see by the contributions in the chat that there's some very, very knowledgeable people there and incredibly active, and I pay respect to all of you for the work that you do. So thanks very much, everybody, and see you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.